So the Octatrack can do everything, but if you've ever tried recording or looping, you probably discovered it also does everything wrong if you miss one setting. Today I'm going to show you how to actually set up the recorder buffers, cover recorder setup 1 and 2 in detail, and explain the pattern settings that make your loops behave properly live. And don't worry, I'll keep it conversational, like explaining to a friend over coffee, not reading an Electron manual to you. I've got my modular connected to the CD inputs of my Octatrack, because that's what I want to record and loop and eventually slice. But before we go any further, we're gonna check out the global settings. So go into Project, System, Personalize, and there I love to turn on the Record Quick mode, because that way I can loop with just one hand. If I'm in a track and it is selected, I just need to press the source I want to sample from, which is really handy for one-hand sampling. What I also like to do is in the control input, my modular is quite noisy, so I put a noise gate onto the CD input. I'm gonna check it out on my headphones. And I'm gonna crank it up just like, yeah, a little bit. Okay, perfect. Let's have a look at the recorder setup 1. You get into it by pressing Function and REC 1. And there you can see the first 6 settings. Setting number 1 defines if you want a signal from the inputs A and B. It can be as a true stereo or like as stereo sums or just mono signals. The same is for the input CD, where I have currently my modular connected, but I prefer to turn the direct inputs off. Then we have the recording length as a third setting. You can send it to max to have maximum length, or as I prefer, beat synced and time synced loops and recordings, I put it to 64 steps. Then you can choose the trigger mode. There are 3 different modes, and this is where most people also get lost. So 1 means you press once and the records for the R length you set up here, and then it automatically stops. Then there is 1, 2, which is the same as 1, but you can stop early by pressing REC again. And there is hold, which records only while you hold REC, and then instantly plays back when you release. I just keep this on 1, to be honest. Then there is source 3, where you can set up any internal source to be resampled, like either any of the sample tracks, the main output, or even the cue. And the last is if you want to record it as a loop or not. So it would instantly play back as a loop. I leave it off. So these are my preferred settings, even though I don't really care about the trigger mode, because I prefer using the quick record. So this page is your input source and your trigger style. Now let's have a look in the recording setup 2. There you can find in the beginning the fade-ins and fade-outs. You can set up in sequencer steps. I like to have them at 0.1 to 5. Then you've got the direct monitoring levels from inputs A, B, and C, D. This sets how much of the live loop you hear while recording. So adjust it if you don't want to hear double. Then we have the quantized recording. It keeps the pattern length if you want a clean quantized loop. I love to have it on P length. And there is QPL, which is quantized playback. This controls when playback starts if you trigger it manually. To be honest, it's the weirdest setting ever and I don't really understand, and I'm always keeping it on off. If you have any idea how to use it properly, please let me know. So recorder setup 2 is like your loop hygiene. If something sounds weird or your loop is clicking, check there. Alright, we got all of the recorder setup settings down now. So let's look at recorder tricks. So I'm gonna put on my headphones to actually hear something as well. So, as you already might have noticed from my former videos, I love to use this looper fader trick on the Octatrack. So let's use this to check out the different recorder tricks. So we got this. Now we hear the modular through. Here's my looper setup. We hear nothing. So let's sample via quick record at first, the modular input. So I want to sample source 3, so internal, into my looper. So I have this track selected and only have to press this to initiate recording on the next bar. Now it's recording for 64 steps in total. There we go. We also have a trigger here, perfect. And now when I should go this way, should stay the same. So yeah, we have a perfect loop. We can hear that if we change something on the first loop. For example, I'm gonna make it longer and deeper even. Now we can. There's the loop. Okay, perfect. Now the other way you can also resample is by setting triggers. You can put either normal triggers or one-shot triggers. Make sure in recorder setup 1 or 2, otherwise you will just set a normal trig and not a recorder trig. Then you go into quick recording mode, and with one push you set a regular recorder trig, which means every time the sequencer passes by it's gonna start recording again. Which also means it's gonna delete your recording buffer. So be careful with this because you might delete stuff you haven't saved before. When you set up recorder trigs, you can choose for each recorder trig to have its separate source. So, for example, you can choose first trig should only record the input AB, this one input CD, and this one the internal, which I set up to track 6. So this is amazing when you want to automate your recording process live. And the one-shot recorder trigs, they work pretty similar, so make sure you're in the recording setup 1 or 2. And then you press function and the step where you want to put the trig while you're in grid mode, and it's gonna light up in yellow. And when it passes, it's flashing. So what that means, when the one-shot recorder trig is flashing in yellow and red, it's deactivated. By pushing it again, it turns yellow, it's activated, and once the sequencer passes by, it's deactivated again. So this is something really useful if you want to automate recording in a live set. You can also set up the recorder trigs in the track trig edit. If you go all the way to the recorder trigs, you can see it there. These are the swing trigs, slide, normal trigs. So yeah, you could also program them here. But I got a really important tip and kind of warning for you. If you like to use the crossfader trig as much as I do, it's super important that you set your main mix to something between 30 and 32. Check it out, what sounds good to you. Because like a long time ago, Electron has introduced an update for the Octatrack where resampled loops would automatically be lowered in volume. So the recorded sample would be lower than what you've heard before. So it would mess with the volumes when you would do the crossfader trig. But if you keep the mix at some value between 30 and 33, you won't have that problem. All right, so let's have a little demo. I set it all up for kind of techno because that's my mood and that's easy for me to do. Okay, so let's have a little jam. If this finally made the Octatrack click for you, hit like, subscribe and tell me in the comments, are you a pickup machine looper or a flex machine slicer? Because next tutorial we're diving into pickup machines in detail.